I liked Halloween a lot. I mean, the interesting thing is the first Halloween is a strange beast. It's a movie that was made for a very low budget. It was made under very specific circumstances. Originally, I said Babysitter Murders, and then turned into Halloween. And there's a documentary by Adam Simon about 1968 to 1978, all these radical horror films. Then you get Halloween, which is a kind of the straightforward morality tale. If you do this, the boogeyman will get you. And that's then kind of sets in motion a bunch of rules that are then repeated and ad infinitum in Scream. And it also then begins a cycle of kind of fairly retrograde, very mainstream slasher movies that begin with Friday the 13th, which of course was directed by Sean Cunningham, who we get from Last House on the Left. And then we get all those kind of bits. So that's the moment at which gore went mainstream, although Halloween itself is actually fairly visually discreet. But it's a really brilliantly made film because it also has a punky edge. I mean, it's got that kind of, firstly, the Panaglide following of Michael Myers, the way the score is sort of stripped down with that, semitonal 5/4. Everything about it is...
With the what?
It's fine.
I remember that, but I didn't know it was a semitonal.
Yeah. So basically, it's a film that people have tried to repeat and imitate and usually fail, because usually what they end up doing is relying on gore rather than suspense. And it also walks a very thin line between he's a real person, but he's supernatural. He's Michael Myers, but he's also the Shape. What this does is basically take that template and rather affectionately and lovingly revisit it 40 years later, with Laurie Strode now having become somebody who has spent the whole of her life preparing for Michael Myers' return, but also her life has been ruined by the fact that she has lived in the spectre of it. And now we have 3 generations of these women, all of whom are in their own variously strong ways, even though some of them don't realise it, waiting for the return of Michael Myers. And what the film manages to do is to touch the bases that you want in a Halloween movie, but to do it in a way which is inventive enough. So there's an awful lot of mirroring and flipping of key scenes from the original. I mean, you were just mentioning one earlier on, which we won't say what it is, but there are iconic images from the first film which are very cleverly inverted and turned round. So what the film is doing is playing with the duality of the hunter and the hunted and swapping those things over. And the cinematography very specifically does these kind of mirror images of Laurie and Michael. The second thing is, when it needs to be nasty, it is nasty. And actually some of the suspense sequences I thought were very well done. They were done with a real kind of grip the edge of your seat, because something nasty is going to happen. And when it does, you know that the movie is going to have the strength of its convictions. It's going to have guts. I thought that it was funny when it needed to be funny and straight when it needed to be straight. And an awful lot of it has got to do with the fact that Jamie Lee Curtis is, as you could hear from that interview, is hugely fired up by the project. And, obviously, Carpenter coming back to revisit that score. I thought of all that, when you've had so many sequels and spin-offs, with the exception of, 3, Season of the Witch, which is a different narrative arc, it's very good to see something which basically throws out all the sequels and says, okay, we're going to go back, we're going to say this happened after the first one, now 40 years on, now we're kind of mirroring, now we're kind of repeating, but we're turning things on their head. So although it's not the most original film, and although it's not the scariest film, I mean, there's nothing in it that's as scary or as disturbing as the opening act of Hereditary, and it's not as radical as, say, Wes Craven's New Nightmare was. It is a really good, smart, wry popcorn thriller that, when it needs to deliver a punch, does do, and not least of that is because Jamie Lee Curtis is ripping it up. She is hustling her way through the movie like she owns it, and she does.